Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1: The Ship Beside the Shore. The ship waits beside the shore in a sheltered northern inlet. For now, almost nothing moves. A few pale ripples cross the water and tap against the lowest plank of the hull. The tide is rising, though so gradually that its progress can be noticed only by watching the dark line of wet sand beneath the vessel. Beyond the inlet, the wider sea lies hidden behind a low arm of rock and grass. The morning air carries the scent of salt water, damp rope, wool, and distant wood smoke from the settlement farther inland. Close to the ship, there is another smell, deeper and sharper. It is the earthy scent of tar, worked into ropes and pressed along seams, where it helps to keep the sea outside the wooden hull. A rope runs from the bow to a heavy stone above the waterline. It slackens, tightens, and slackens again. Each time the tide lifts the ship, the timber gives a soft creak, as though the vessel is quietly adjusting itself to the morning. This is a ship of the Viking Age, a broad stretch of time conventionally dated from about AD 750 to 1050. Those dates are useful, but they are not fixed walls around the past. Changes came at different times in different places. The people of the northern lands did not wake one morning to discover that a new age had begun, nor did they see it end on one particular day. They simply lived through seasons of farming, fishing, building, trading, traveling, and raising families, while the world around them slowly changed. The word Viking can also be misleading when it is used to describe every Scandinavian person from this period. It originally referred more closely to an activity, especially raiding or voyaging, than to one people with a single occupation and way of life. Most lives were not spent raiding. Most were shaped by ordinary work, both on land and water. It is often more precise to speak of Viking-age Scandinavians and of the many different journeys they made. The vessel beside this shore is not waiting for a raid. There are no ranks of warriors gathering on the beach, and no carved dragon rises above the bow. Decorated features did exist, but an elaborate animal head was not necessary on an ordinary working vessel. This ship is practical in its beauty. Its lines have been shaped for cargo, weather, and distance. It will carry useful goods from one settlement to another, along with a small company of travelers who know the coastal waters and the habits of the wind. Not every ship of the Viking Age was a longship. The familiar longship was generally narrow and swift, with room for a large rowing crew. Such vessels could move quickly beneath oars and sail, making them useful for warfare or rapid transport. Yet the northern seas also carried fishing boats, ferries, small coastal traders, and fuller ocean-going cargo ships. The ship waiting here resembles, in purpose, the kind of cargo vessel known as a nar. Its hull is broader and rounder than that of a warship, with useful space at the center for goods. A substantial square sail will provide most of its power once the voyage begins. A relatively small number of oars will help it leave a landing, enter a harbor, or continue moving when the wind is unhelpful. It need not be the largest kind of cargo ship. Smaller trading vessels also traveled between settlements and through sheltered waters. Depending on the size of the ship, its route, its cargo, and the expected weather, a modest vessel might be managed by roughly 6 to 12 people. Every person aboard would have useful work to do, and each would depend upon the skill and attention of the others. From the beach, the hull appears to be made from long bands of dark wood. Each plank overlaps the one below it, rather like roof shingles arranged so that rain runs across them. This method is called clinker building. It creates a strong hull without making the vessel needlessly heavy, and it gives the side of the ship its clear, repeating pattern. Oak was frequently used for hull planking because of its strength, although available wood and building choices varied by region. Along the overlapping edges run rows of iron rivets. On the inside of the hull, the end of each rivet is held by a small metal plate called a rove. Rivet and rove secure the planks together, one careful fastening after another. Most are difficult to see from the shore, yet together they form a quiet order from bow to stern. The ship is not intended to be rigid like a stone wall. Internal frames support the hull, but a well-built vessel can still yield a little as water passes beneath it. On a living sea, this slight flexibility is useful. The timbers move together with the changing pressure of the waves, settling and lifting as one joined structure. Even a carefully fitted wooden hull has narrow seams. Fibers are pressed into these gaps to prevent as much water as possible from finding its way through. This work is called caulking. Depending upon place, time, and available materials, shipbuilders might use twisted wool, animal hair, moss, or other fibers. These could be combined with tar or a similar sealant. Where the stern, the caulking can be seen as a dark line between two planks. It carries the mingled scents of wool and tar. A few pale fibers show where work has recently been done, but most have already become part of the hull, darkened by weather and salt. The vessel sits lightly enough in the inlet that much of its shape remains visible. Many Scandinavian ships had a shallow draft, meaning that they did not sit deeply in the water. This allowed them to enter river mouths, approach beaches, and pass through sheltered inlets that a deeper vessel might not reach. A shallow draft did not make every shore suitable. The crew still had to consider the tide, the seabed, the weight of the cargo, the size of the vessel, and the weather. A beach of firm sand might offer a useful landing, while hidden rocks or heavy surf could make another place unwise. Here the shore slopes gently beneath clear water. Smooth stones lie below the ripples, their colors softened by the moving surface. Near the stern rests a large steering oar. It is mounted on the right-hand side when facing forward, the side known as starboard. Before rudders were fixed at the center of a ship's stern, this side-mounted blade allowed the person steering to guide the vessel through the water. For now, it remains raised and secured. Its worn wooden handle rests quietly beneath a loop of rope. The mast stands above the hull, plain and sturdy. Its square sail has not yet been raised. Folded woolen cloth lies aboard in a heavy bundle, protected from unnecessary damp. When spread before the wind, the sail will become the ship's broadest and most visible feature. At present, the mast and rigging draw only a few still lines against the pale sky. The people who will make the voyage begin to appear gradually. One figure follows a path through the grass, carrying nothing yet. Another stands beside a low building and speaks to someone within. Their voices do not travel clearly across the inlet. The sound reaches the shore only as a low murmur, blending with the water and the occasional call of a bird. A dog wanders to the edge of the beach. It pauses beside a coil of rope, sniffs once, and then settles on the sand. The crew members pay it little attention. There is no need to call anyone to order. The day's work has been discussed, and each person knows that the loading will soon begin. They have chosen a season when travel is practical, though no northern season offers complete certainty. The daylight lasts long enough for useful work, and the coastal routes are open. Their purpose is peaceful. They will carry trade goods, visit another settlement, and perhaps return with objects that are scarce at home. A journey of this kind may strengthen ties between households as surely as it moves cargo. People travel with more than the objects they can place in a chest. News moves with them. So do messages, songs, craft knowledge, and memories of distant shores. Yet all of that will come later. For now, the ship remains beside familiar land, held by its rope, while the tide rises beneath it. Several sea chests have been placed above the waterline. Their lids are closed. A bundle of spare rope lies beside them, its coils dark with tar. Farther up the beach, folded woolens wait beneath a covering. Nearby are food, tools, and small goods intended for exchange. Nothing can be placed aboard without thought. Weight must be balanced so that the ship sits properly in the water. Food and drinking water must be stored where they can be reached. Tools that may be needed during the voyage cannot be buried beneath the trade goods. Spare rope must remain ready for use, though there is no need for haste now. Each object will have its place. Each bundle will be lifted, carried over the stones, and lowered into the hull. The work will be repetitive but not careless. A vessel is a limited space, and everything aboard must share it with everything else, including the people themselves. For another quiet moment, no one lifts anything. The tide rises by one more small measure. Water reaches a new row of stones, filling the spaces between them, and lifting strands of brown seaweed from the sand. The rope at the bow draws gently taut. Timber answers with another low creak. One crew member looks toward the ship, then back toward the waiting supplies. Another steps down to the water and places a hand against the hull, feeling the slight motion as the inlet lifts it. There is a brief exchange of words, quiet and familiar. Then the first bundle is raised. It is carried down the beach at an even pace, with careful steps over the rounded stones. Within it are practical things for the northern sea: wool, food, tools, and small goods meant for exchange. Other loads will follow. There will be water, grain, dried fish, spare cordage, and the personal belongings of those making the journey. The waiting vessel receives the first bundle without ceremony. Morning settles more fully over the inlet. The scent of tar remains close to the hull. Ripples continue to tap against the lowest plank, and the rising tide holds the vessel a little more gently than before. Along the shore, another bundle is made ready. Little by little, the quiet ship beside the beach begins to become a traveling home. Chapter 2. Loading for the Northern Sea. The first bundle comes aboard in the arms of a broad-shouldered crew member. He steps from the damp stones onto a narrow plank laid between shore and ship. The plank gives a little beneath his weight. He waits for the movement to settle, then continues. Another person stands inside the vessel, ready to receive the load. Lift, pass, lower, secure. The bundle is wrapped in coarse woolen cloth and tied with cord. It contains folded garments and lengths of woven fabric. Some are intended for the travelers, while others may be exchanged at settlements farther along the coast. The cloth is taken many hours to make. Wool had to be gathered, cleaned, combed, spun into thread, and worked upon a loom. Even an ordinary length of fabric holds a great deal of patient labor. A hand presses the bundle, testing how tightly it has been packed. The folded wool compresses beneath the palm. Then it is lowered into the vessel, not at the narrow bow or stern, but nearer the broad middle, where its weight can be carried more evenly. The ship is not merely being filled, it is being balanced. Every object has a place, though that place may change before the work is finished. Heavy containers belong low in the hull and close to the center whenever possible. Lighter bundles can rest around them, filling spaces and helping to keep harder objects from moving. Things needed during the journey must remain within reach. A useful tool buried beneath a heap of cargo is of little use at all. Another load follows. Lift, pass, lower, secure. This one is a wooden container holding grain. It lands with a dull knock against the timber before careful hands guide it into position. Wooden barrels were known in the Viking Age, but goods were not always carried in identical containers of a standard shape. A ship might hold a mixture of barrels, tubs, buckets, baskets, boxes, pottery vessels, and chests. Some were made especially for storage. Others were ordinary household objects, pressed into service for the journey. The container of grain is wedged beside another heavy load. A folded scrap of cloth is pushed between wood and wood, softening the contact. Rope passes around both and is drawn firm. The rope itself may have begun as hemp or flax, as material taken from the inner bark of a tree, or as fibers of animal origin. The materials varied from place to place and according to the work the rope needed to do. The strongest lines belong with the sail, the anchor, and the holding of the ship. Smaller cords bind parcels, close sacks, and keep tools together. One length lies on the shore in tidy loops. It has been examined already, but an older sailor runs it slowly through his hands once more. His fingers pause at a roughened place. He bends the fibers, studies them, and sets that section aside for repair. There is little conversation. A glance or a nod is enough. The vessel rests a little lower than it did at dawn. The change is small, yet those loading it notice. They watch the line where water meets the hull. They look from bow to stern, making sure that neither end sits too deeply. When a chest is placed slightly too far aft, two crew members lift it again and carry it forward by a few paces. Lift, shift, lower, secure. The chest holds iron goods. There may be tools, simple fittings, and useful household pieces made by a skilled smith. Iron is valuable, and it is heavy. The chest is placed low and near the middle of the ship, where its weight is least likely to disturb the vessel's balance. Beside it goes a smaller box of whetstones. These fine-grained stones are used to sharpen the edges of knives, axes, and other tools. Some regions produce stone especially suited to this purpose, and whetstones could travel far from the places where they were cut. A whetstone is plain to look at, yet it supports many kinds of work. A keen knife prepares food, shapes wood, trims rope, and performs many quiet tasks in the course of a day. The next bundles are softer. Rolled hides give off a dry, earthy smell. Furs have been folded inward to protect their surfaces. There may also be finished garments among them, such as tunics, cloaks, mittens, and warm coverings for the legs. Exactly what any one ordinary ship carried is difficult to know after so many centuries. Archaeology often reveals broad patterns more clearly than the contents of a particular voyage. Yet wool, cloth, hides, furs, tools, crafted objects, grain, and household wares all belong to the networks of northern trade. This voyage is peaceful and practical. Its cargo is not treasure taken in war. It consists mainly of regional goods moving between communities. These are things plentiful in one place and useful in another. A basket of carved wooden objects is carried aboard. Bowls nest inside one another. Small handles and pegs fill the spaces between them. The basket is light enough to place above the heavier cargo, but it must still be tied down. Even a calm sea can roll a loose object from side to side. A turn of the ship can send an unsecured box sliding across the floorboards. When waves lift one side and then the other, any shifting weight may affect the vessel. The crew knows this without discussion. A rope is passed, a knot is drawn, the basket settles against folded wool. Along the shore, supplies for the travelers wait in separate groups. They are kept apart from the trade goods because they will be needed before the voyage is done. Water comes first among these necessities. Several containers are checked for leaks. Their seams are examined and their lids are tested. Water is heavy, so it must be stowed with care, but it cannot be buried where no one can reach it. One container is handed down and lowered near the center. Another follows, positioned to balance the first. The ship settles another quiet fraction into the inlet. Food is arranged around the water and beneath the places where the crew will sit. There is dried fish, firm and light compared with fresh fish. Drying was one useful way to preserve food, though it was not the only method. Fish and meat might also be fermented, smoked, or prepared in other local ways. Salt could be used where it was available, but it was not equally plentiful or inexpensive in every region. A sack of flour is wrapped against dampness. Another vessel holds grain that may later become porridge. There may be bread suitable for the early part of the journey, and perhaps a small store of cheese or butter. Both were known foods, and either might reasonably have traveled aboard a ship like this, though the exact provisions of this ordinary voyage cannot be known. The food is plain and practical. It has been chosen because it can be stored and because it offers steady nourishment. Meals at sea depend on weather, time, and opportunity. When a safe landing can be found, preparing warm food ashore is often easier than cooking aboard a wooden vessel, crowded with rope, cloth, provisions, and cargo. A small cooking pot is placed where it can be reached without unloading half the ship. Wooden cups and bowls go beside it. A bucket is tucked close by. Personal knives remain with their owners, hanging from belts or wrapped among their belongings. Each traveler brings only what can be managed within the narrow shared space. A spare tunic, a cloak, perhaps a blanket, a comb, a needle case, or a small token from home may be packed into a chest or bundle. Nothing aboard is entirely private. There are no cabins and few hidden corners, yet people recognize one another's possessions. A particular cord, a carved mark, or a familiar patch makes each bundle easy to identify. The sun rises higher, thinning the morning mist. Damp planks begin to dry. The smell of seaweed mingles with wool, tar, timber, grain, and the faint, sharp scent of iron. The work continues at an even pace. Lift, pass, lower, secure. A wooden tub, a basket of household wares, a wrapped set of tools, a bundle of spare woolens. Each load changes the way the vessel rests in the water. From time to time, the person overseeing the cargo steps back onto the shore. He studies the ship's long shape and the dark water line along its overlapping planks. Then he points quietly. A box moves a little toward the bow. A water vessel shifts nearer the center. A soft bundle fills an empty space. The adjustments are modest, but together they matter. A well-loaded cargo ship should sit evenly. Its burden must not make it slow to answer the steering oar, nor should loose goods disturb it when the water moves beneath the hull. This vessel is broader than the long, narrow ships often associated with warfare. Northern shipbuilders made different forms for different purposes. A swift warship and a cargo carrier did not need the same proportions. A trading vessel, sometimes described by the Old Norse word knar, had greater fullness in the hull, allowing it to carry goods across the water. Not every merchant vessel was identical, and not every voyage crossed a great ocean. Many journeys followed the coast, linking nearby settlements and passing from one familiar harbor to another. By late morning, the goods lie in compact order. The center of the ship carries the greatest weight. Food and water remain accessible. Spare cordage is kept near the working ropes, but separated so that it will not become tangled with them. A tool chest can be opened if a fitting needs repair. Cloaks and woolens are close enough to reach when the air grows cool. The crew tests the lashings one final time. Hands press bundles and pull knots. Containers answer with low wooden sounds. Nothing rolls, nothing slides. Rope is laid down in clean loops, ready to be taken up without confusion. The waiting piles have disappeared from the shore. Pale patches remain on the stones where boxes and baskets had rested. There are marks from boots in the damp sand and a shallow track where one heavy container was moved closer to the ship. The last water vessel is checked. Its lid is firm. It is lowered into the place left for it and secured between a chest and a bundle of wool. One sailor leans down and presses the knot with his thumb. Another rests a hand against the container and gives it a careful push. It does not move. The loading is complete. For a little while no one speaks. The crew looks over the hull, the cargo, and the ropes. They have filled the ship without crowding its working spaces. They have kept the heaviest objects low and near the middle. They have left food, water, clothing, and tools close enough to reach. The cargo has become part of the vessel now. Its weight rests against the curved timber. Its shape fills the low spaces between ribs and floorboards. It will move when the ship moves, rise when the ship rises, and settle when the ship settles. The narrow loading plank is drawn aboard. One by one, the crew steps into the vessel. Under their shifting weight, the hull moves softly with the tide. The bow rope draws taut, relaxes, and draws taut again. The ship is no longer an empty shape beside the shore. It carries food, water, tools, cloth, trade goods, and the small possessions of its people. Balanced low within the timber, these things have become part of a traveling home. The final rope is coiled and placed within reach. Around the vessel, the inlet has grown quiet. Small ripples touch the lowest plank. The familiar shore waits nearby, pale beneath the rising sun. The crew settles into place, and as the tide lifts beneath the loaded hull, the ship begins to answer the northern water. Chapter 3. Leaving the familiar coast. The first oars enter the water almost without a splash. Their long blades sink beside the hull, darkening beneath the clear surface of the inlet. The rowers lean gently into the work. There is no need for haste. The rising tide has already loosened the ship from the shore, and each measured stroke carries it a little farther from the damp stones. A final hand on land releases the bow rope. It is drawn aboard and laid in a loose coil, still wet where it rested near the water. For a moment, the vessel moves only through the strength of the rowers and the quiet pull of the tide. The timber creaks around them. A water container shifts against its padding, then settles. Bundles of wool and folded cloth remain firm beneath their lashings. The loaded hull feels full but orderly, with every chest and basket held in the place chosen for it. Behind the ship, the inlet is familiar in every detail. Low roofs stand near the shore, their outlines softened by the morning light. A thin thread of smoke rises from one of them and bends inland with the breeze. Trees grow above the houses. Beyond those trees lies a higher slope, where grass gives way to exposed stone. Someone remains at the water's edge, watching. A hand is lifted. Another answers from the ship. Then the oars dip again. This is a cargo vessel, broad enough through the middle to carry useful weight. Ships of the Viking Age were built for different purposes. A long, narrow warship might have many oars and a large rowing crew. A trading vessel, often described by the Old Norse word knar, had a fuller body and more room for barrels, bundles, tools, cloth, and goods intended for other settlements. Such a ship could be rowed when necessary, but rowing was not its chief strength. With cargo resting low in the hull, the crew would not drive it swiftly through the sea for hour after hour. The oars were practical aids. They helped the ship leave a beach, enter a harbor, pass through restricted water, cross a patch of calm, or correct its position when wind and current moved it away from the intended course. Now the oars carry the vessel toward the mouth of the inlet. The rowers know the shallow places. They avoid a pale patch where stones lie close beneath the surface. They keep away from a line of weed that marks a submerged ledge. Near the stern, the steersman watches both the shore and the changing water. The ship is guided by a broad steering oar fastened along one side near the stern. Its blade lies beneath the surface, where the steersman controls it with a horizontal handle called a tiller. The tiller moves only a little beneath his hand. Steering is not simply a matter of pointing the bow. The steersman feels the pressure of water against the blade. He notices the current slipping out of the inlet, the low waves approaching from beyond the headland, and the breeze touching the side of his face. A small movement of the tiller turns the ship gradually. Too much force would waste effort and disturb the course. Too little would allow the bow to wander. The work depends upon sensitivity rather than strength alone. The vessel passes the last sheltered rocks. Here the water has a broader motion. Long folds travel beneath the hull, lifting it and setting it down again. The oars rise and fall with those folds. Each rower adjusts without being told. Their timing is not as exact as a drumbeat, but it is shared, learned through experience and through attention to the people nearby. Ahead, open water lies between the headlands. Islands rest farther along the coast, blue-gray beneath the changing sky. The crew begins to prepare the sail. This, far more than the oars, will carry the cargo vessel on a substantial journey. The sail is square in its general shape and hangs from a long wooden spar called a yard. Until now, the sail and yard have been secured so they will not interfere with the rowing. Ropes are freed from their coils. Hands check the lines, passing them through practiced fingers to make certain that no knot has tightened where it should not. The rowers shorten their strokes while the vessel continues toward deeper water. One person takes hold of the rope used to raise the yard. Another watches the folded sail. A third makes sure that nothing catches against a chest, a cloak pin, or the edge of the hull. The rope tightens. The mast answers with a low wooden sound. The yard begins to rise, slowly at first. The woolen cloth lifts with it in heavy folds. It does not flutter like something thin and weightless. It opens with substance, one part unfolding after another, until a broad surface hangs above the vessel. A sail was among the most valuable pieces of equipment aboard a Viking Age ship. It required a great quantity of wool and many hours of careful labor. The wool had to be prepared, spun into yarn, and woven into cloth. Sections of fabric could then be joined to form the full sail. Its making depended upon the skill of many hands, much of the work taking place far from the shore where the finished cloth would finally meet the wind. No complete Viking Age sail survives. Wool and rope decay more readily than iron rivets or buried pieces of timber. Knowledge of these sails comes instead from limited physical traces, images, written sources, and experimental archaeology. Reconstructed ships and sails can be tested on the water, offering useful clues about how the original vessels may have behaved. The sail above the crew is therefore best understood with some humility. Viking Age sails were probably most often woven from wool. Their surfaces were likely treated to resist water and to perform more effectively in the wind. Modern reconstructions have used substances involving animal fat, oils, or pigments. Yet no single treatment can be named with certainty for every sail, region, or century. Methods may have varied according to available materials and knowledge passed from one craftsperson to another. As the yard reaches its place, the sail remains loose for a moment. Then the lower lines are adjusted. A breath of wind presses into the cloth. The wool shifts, trembles, and begins to curve. Its sound changes from a regular flapping to a deeper and steadier murmur. The mast leans into its task. Ropes draw firm, and the vessel gathers a new kind of motion. The oars make 2 more strokes, then their blades lift clear. Drops fall from them in bright strings. One by one the oars are brought aboard and placed where they will not roll or catch against the cargo. The rowers settle back, flexing their hands and shoulders. Their work has carried the ship beyond the shelter of the inlet. The wind will now provide the greater share of its power. A square sail works best when the wind comes from behind the vessel or from one side. Skilled sailors can also adjust sail and course so that the ship makes progress at an angle to the wind. Yet vessels of this kind could not sail as close into the wind as many modern boats with sails arranged more nearly along the length of the hull. When the wind opposes the desired direction, patience becomes part of the voyage. A crew may alter course, wait for a change, use a sheltered channel, or move through a series of angled passages. The sea offers no straight road. A successful route is shaped by what the wind, tide, coastline, and vessel allow. Today the breeze is favorable. It comes from behind and to one side, pressing into the square of wool, and holding it full. The ship moves beyond the headland at a calm, useful pace. At the steering oar, the tiller remains alive beneath the steersman's hand. Each wave presses differently against the blade. Each small change in the sail alters the balance of the hull. One sailor eases a line by the width of a hand. Another looks back at the wake. The steersman moves the tiller slightly, and the bow settles toward a gap between two islands. No order needs to be shouted. A few quiet words are enough. Modern replica voyages help show how such ships may have sailed. They reveal how a woolen sail can draw, how a flexible wooden hull meets the northern sea, and how a crew can work with ropes and simple wooden fittings. Yet each experiment belongs to its own day, with its own wind, its own crew, and its own choices in reconstruction. Such voyages provide insight, but they are not exact proof of how every historical journey unfolded. The people aboard this vessel do not pause to explain their knowledge. It is present in their movements. It can be seen in the way a rope is held, in the brief glance toward the water, and in the quiet adjustment of the steering oar as the ship meets another low swell. The familiar coast remains beside them. Its details slowly become smaller. Roofs merge into the muted colors of earth and grass. Individual trees are no longer easy to distinguish. The person who stood at the water's edge has long since become part of the shoreline itself, though someone aboard still looks back from time to time. The land does not disappear. During a coastal voyage through northern waters, it may remain visible for much of the journey. Headlands overlap in the distance. Islands offer recognizable shapes. Narrow sounds provide sheltered routes, and high ground can be seen from far across the water. The ship is leaving home, but it has not yet left the company of land. A line of pale birds rests near a rocky point. Beyond them, the next island shows a dark ridge and a small protected bay. Farther on lie more headlands, more channels, and more quiet places where a crew might pause if the weather or the hour made rest seem wise. For now, the wind remains steady. The sail holds its rounded shape. The ropes hum softly under strain. Beneath the crew, the overlapping planks move with the water. The long hull rises over a gentle swell, pauses for the smallest moment, and settles into the hollow beyond it. Then it rises again. With the oars brought in, the ship feels quieter. Those who were rowing now have time to notice the small world contained within the hull. Chests stand close beside their knees. Bundles fit between frames. Tools remain secured within reach. Every object has its place, and every person must find room among the objects. There are no broad decks or private cabins here. There is only the open vessel, the cargo resting low, and the narrow spaces left for sitting, working, eating, and resting. A sea chest may support a seated sailor. A folded cloak may soften a hard edge of timber. A hand may rest on a nearby rope to feel the movement of the sail. The coast continues beside them, softened by distance but still reassuringly present. The roofs have faded from view, yet the hills remain. One headland opens slowly behind another, and the islands ahead grow clearer as the ship approaches. The steering oar presses gently against the water. The square sail draws with a deep, even sound. Within the hull, the carefully balanced cargo rises and settles with the sea, and now, with the shore receding and the vessel moving steadily beneath the morning sky, the crew can begin to consider the small amount of room each person has aboard. They look to the chests that serve as seats, the bundles secured between the timbers, and the few narrow spaces where clothing, tools, and tired bodies must all find a place. Chapter 4. Finding a Place Aboard. The familiar coast continues beside the ship, softened by distance. Low hills rise beyond the water, their slopes divided into quiet bands of grass, stone, and shadow. The roofs of the settlement have faded from view, but the shape of the land remains reassuring. One headland opens slowly behind another, while the islands ahead grow clearer beneath the morning sky. Nearer at hand, the vessel carries a smaller landscape of its own. There are ribs of curved timber, overlapping planks, coils of rope, folded wool, wooden boxes, and bundles tied with cord. The cargo rests low in the hull, rising and settling gently with the sea. Every object has been placed with care, and every person must now find a place among them. There are no private passenger cabins aboard this ship. No doors close behind the travelers, and no passage leads to a quiet room below. Viking Age ships varied in size and purpose, and their deck arrangements were not all the same. Cargo vessels could include working areas, storage spaces, and open parts of the hull. Some had loose deck boards that could be lifted to reach spaces beneath. Whatever the exact arrangement, room was valuable. Nothing could be placed without thought. The crew understands this as naturally as people on shore understand the rooms of a familiar house. They know where a foot may safely rest, where a chest may stand, and where a rope must be left entirely free. They know which spaces belong to the cargo and which must remain open for work. Their order is not marked by walls or doors. It is held in memory and habit. Near the middle of the vessel stands the mast, carrying the square sail above them. The base of the mast, and the timbers supporting it, must remain clear. Ropes used to raise, lower, and control the sail pass through the working space around it. One line leads toward the stern. Another rests in a careful coil, ready to run without tangling. A bundle left across either rope might have to be moved in haste if the wind changed, so no bundle is allowed to remain there. One traveler reaches down and shifts a woolen wrap a hand's breadth toward the side. Beneath it rests a small leather bag darkened by long use. The wrap is folded once more, and its corners are tucked beneath the bag so that a passing foot will not catch them. The movement is small and practiced. The narrow space becomes orderly again. Farther forward, another traveler lifts the lid of a wooden chest. It opens with a quiet creak. Clothing and personal possessions are kept within, protected from wandering feet and sudden movement. The traveler checks a bundle, presses it back into place, and lowers the lid. The chest is plain and strong. Its corners have been worn smooth by hands in use. Like many objects aboard, it can serve more than one purpose. It holds possessions and keeps small belongings together. It can also offer a place to sit. There was no single rule for how chests were used on every ship. It is not certain that each chest served as a standardized rowing bench. Some could be moved when work required it. Others might be secured among cargo. The people aboard adapted their belongings to the needs of the vessel and the journey. A crew member sits on the chest now, with one leather-shod foot braced lightly against the planking. The other rests beside a coil of cordage. Before settling, the traveler bends and draws the loose end of a rope out from beneath the chest. The line is placed where it can move freely. Only then does the traveler sit back, gathering a cloak close around the body. Leather soles make soft, dull sounds against the timber, as people shift from one place to another. The ship rolls gently. The motion is not enough to disturb anyone, yet it is always present. A hand touches the side of the vessel, a knee rests against a curved frame, shoulders sway almost without thought. Bodies gradually learn the movement of the hull and begin to move with it. Clothing is part of this quiet adjustment. Northern water can carry a chill even beneath a clear sky. Sunlight may brighten the sail, but the wind still draws warmth from faces and hands. Warm clothing is therefore essential. The travelers may wear woolen tunics or dresses, with trousers or leggings where appropriate. Cloaks are gathered around shoulders. Caps and hoods shelter heads and necks. Mittens, wraps, and spare woolen layers are kept within reach. Leather footwear protects the feet against the worn planking, although each step is still placed with care. Wool remains insulating even when damp, which makes it valuable during travel over northern seas. Yet wet wool also becomes heavy and uncomfortable. Spare clothing must be protected from spray whenever possible. A drier layer may be folded inside a bag, bundle, box, or chest, waiting until it is needed. One cloak lies with its folds pressed neatly together. Its owner smooths the wool with both hands, then places it beside a box of personal belongings. Another traveler pushes a pair of mittens into a hood so that the pieces remain together. A woolen wrap is rolled upon itself and tucked securely beside a bag. Elsewhere, someone checks the fastening of a leather shoe and draws it more closely around the ankle. Another person examines a tool bundle, making sure that it will not loosen as the vessel moves. These are modest actions, repeated without hurry. Each one helps to keep the shared space calm and usable. There is a quiet individuality in the way belongings are arranged. One person keeps tools nearby and spare clothing beneath them. Another prefers to have a cloak within easy reach whenever the sun passes behind a cloud. One bag is carefully folded at the top. Another bundle is tied firmly with cord. Yet personal habits must fit within the common order of the ship. No one can spread possessions widely. No one can claim more space than the work allows. The area around the mast belongs to everyone. So does the route toward the steering position at the stern, where the large side-mounted steering oar guides the vessel. The person tending it must be able to shift stance, lean into the handle, and watch the sail and water. A bag placed there would be more than an inconvenience. It would interrupt the work of the ship. The sail handling areas must also remain open. When a rope needs to be pulled, it cannot first be uncovered from beneath cloaks, boxes, and tired feet. If the sail must be lowered, space will be needed for its heavy folds. Those who travel aboard know where not to sit just as clearly as they know where they may settle. Even in a calm stretch of water, this awareness remains. A rope may look still, but it belongs to the sail. A clear piece of planking may appear unused, but it may be needed by someone crossing toward the stern. The orderly vessel is never truly empty in any place. Each space has a purpose, even while it waits. Below, some of the travelers lie loose deck boards. On a ship arranged in this way, a board can be lifted to reach storage beneath. One crew member kneels, steadies against the motion of the hull, and slicks fingers beneath the edge of a plank. The board rises slowly. A dim space appears below, holding goods within the ship. A wrapped item is checked. Nothing has shifted far. The board is lowered again until its edge rests evenly beside the others. A palm presses it flat, and the traveler moves away. The ship carries no unnecessary display along its sides. Shields are often associated with Viking ships, and shields were found with the Gokstad ship. Ships could display them in martial or ceremonial settings. Yet this vessel is making a peaceful journey, carrying people and goods between communities. Rows of shields along the outer rails are not required here. During an ordinary sea journey, shields placed outside could be exposed to waves and spray. They might also interfere with ropes, oars, and the daily work of the crew. On this cargo vessel, the sides remain practical and uncluttered. The open hull gives everyone a view of everyone else. There is little privacy, but the feeling need not be harsh. Courtesy can create a small, quiet boundary, even where no walls exist. A person arranging a cloak is left undisturbed. Someone checking a bag is given room to finish. If a damp outer layer must be adjusted, companions turn their attention toward the coast, the sail, or a nearby rope. Privacy can be made from patience, habit, and the simple agreement to allow another person a moment of quiet. Conversation follows the same measured order. A few words pass between two crew members about a bundle near the bow. Another traveler asks for a length of cord. Someone gestures toward a patch of darker water beyond the sail's shadow. Then the voices fall away again. In their place come the familiar sounds of the voyage. Timber creaks softly as the hull rises upon the water. The sail draws with a low, even note. Small waves brush against the overlapping planks. A rope shifts against wood, then grows still. Within the vessel, each place has been shaped by purpose. The cargo rests where its weight can be carried well. Water and food remain protected. Tools needed during the voyage can be reached without disturbing everything around them. Spare rope is kept out of the way, though never buried beyond use. The people fit themselves into the spaces that remain. They sit near enough to share warmth when the air cools, yet leave room for hands and feet to work. A folded cloak softens the hard edge of timber. A chest supports a seated traveler. A woolen wrap fills the narrow space beside a bag, where it cannot slide across the planking. To someone seeing it for the first time, the arrangement might appear crowded. To the crew, it feels compact rather than confused. Order does not come from fixed lockers, sleeping bunks, or cabins below. None of those comforts belong to this open ship. Instead, order comes from attention. Each person remembers which bag lies beside which frame. They know which chest may be shifted and which deck board can be raised. They know where a cloak can be placed without covering a line, and where leather soles may rest without blocking a path. The vessel feels manageable because everyone understands where things belong. As the ship passes the next rocky point, sunlight reaches farther into the hull. It warms the lid of the worn chest and glows across the folded wool. Threads of gray and brown become visible within a cloak. A rope casts a narrow shadow over the planks, and the shadow moves gently with the sail above. For a while, no one needs to change anything. The vessel carries its small community onward. Personal possessions are contained in bags, bundles, boxes, and chests. Cloaks wait for colder air. Mittens remain tucked inside a hood. Tools are secure. The mast has clear space around it. The steering position remains open, and the ropes can run without catching. The coast continues beside them, quieter now and farther away. Hills remain visible through the pale air. The sea lifts the vessel, lets it settle, and lifts it again. Then the square sail begins to flutter at a softer patch of wind. Its deep, steady pull eases, and the ship's motion grows quieter. At the stern, the steering oar turns slightly, guiding the bow towards smoother water. Without hurry, a few crew members rise from their carefully chosen places. Leather soles shift upon the planking. Cloaks are gathered clear of the working space. Hands reach for familiar wooden shafts. One after another, several oars are eased over the sides and lowered into the northern sea. Chapter 5. The Rhythm of Oars and Sail. The oars extend from the vessel, one by one, their long wooden shafts passing carefully between waiting hands. On this broad cargo ship, there are fewer oars than there might be on a long, narrow warship. They are not intended to drive the loaded vessel across every mile of the northern sea. When the wind allows, the square sail will do most of that work. The oars have quieter purposes. They can help the ship leave a busy shore, turn through a narrow passage, cross a patch of still water, or pass safely around a rocky point. The crew settles into place. There is no need for a drum, nor is there strong evidence that ordinary Viking Age crews used drums to mark the stroke. Instead, the rowers watch one another. They listen to the small sounds of preparation. A brief instruction may pass along the vessel, but much of the work is understood through practice and attention. Familiar hands know when to begin. Less experienced hands follow the movements of those who have done this before. The first blades lower toward the sea. A blade enters. Water gathers. The rower draws the shaft inward, leaning gently with the pull, rather than working only with the arms. The vessel answers with a small forward movement. Then the blade rises. Droplets fall. For an instant, each drop catches the pale daylight before returning to the water below. Again the blade enters. Water gathers around the broad wooden face. The shaft moves through the rower's hands. The ship glides forward, and the blade rises into the air. Droplets fall in a brief silver line. The motion is simple when described, but it depends upon cooperation. If one oar begins too soon, while another remains deep in the water, the rhythm becomes uneven. If a blade is lifted too late, it may drag and turn the vessel slightly. The rowers need not move with perfect sameness, but they must share an understanding of the stroke. Begin, pull, recover, rest. Between each effort lies a short easing of the body. The shoulders loosen, the hands adjust upon the smooth shaft. Breath enters and leaves. The next stroke follows, neither hurried nor delayed. Begin, pull, recover, rest. Oar arrangements differed from one vessel to another. Some warships had dedicated openings called oar ports set into the sides of the hull. On smaller vessels, an oar could be worked over the gunwale, the upper edge of the ship's side. This ship has been built with cargo and travel in mind, and its rowing places suit its broader shape and practical needs. Even the oars themselves are not necessarily identical. Their length may vary according to where they are used, the dimensions of the ship, and the height of the side above the water. A useful oar must reach the sea at a comfortable angle. It must give the rower enough leverage to move the vessel without forcing the blade too deeply below the surface. Such proportions are learned through long experience, just as shipbuilders learn the bend of timber and sailors learn the pull of rope. The wooden shafts make faint sounds where they meet the ship. There is a low rub, an occasional gentle knock, and the soft sweep of blades through water. Beneath these sounds is the breathing of the crew. Around them the coast continues in gray and green. There is low stone, dark seaweed, and grass lying close against the earth. Ahead, a rocky point reaches into the water like a resting hand. Near its outer edge, the current turns back upon itself, making smooth circles among narrow ripples. At the stern, the steering oar moves a little. Its blade presses against the sea, and the bow shifts toward the wider passage. The rowers continue. A blade enters. Water gathers. The blade rises. Droplets fall. No one speaks for several strokes. There is no need. The vessel responds to their combined pull and moves steadily around the rocks. A seabird stands above them upon a ledge, its pale breast facing the wind. Farther out, the surface of the sea appears darker, touched by a breeze that has not yet reached the sheltered water near shore. Rowing can move a ship when the air is calm, but it is tiring work. A crew would be unlikely to maintain it for a long period, if a suitable wind could fill the sail instead. This is especially true aboard a cargo vessel, where relatively few oars must move not only the hull and crew, but also the barrels, food, tools, woolens, trade goods, and personal belongings resting within it. The effort remains measured. The crew is not trying to race across the water. They need only guide the ship beyond the point and into the returning wind. Popular accounts sometimes give Viking ships a single swift speed, as though every vessel moved in the same pace through every kind of water. In reality, speed depended upon the ship, its load, the wind, the sea, and the skill of those aboard. Modern replicas may travel quickly in favorable conditions, but such performances should not be treated as the ordinary pace of every voyage. Much travel was shaped by waiting, adjusting, and accepting whatever movement the day provided. Here the rowing lasts only as long as it is needed. The rocky point begins to fall behind, the sheltered water opens into a broader reach, and the darker marks upon the sea draw nearer. A cool breath of air touches the rowers' faces. Loose fibers stir along the edge of a cloak. Above them, the sail gives a low flutter. An experienced crew member looks upward, then toward the water ahead. A few short words pass from one part of the ship to another. Hands begin to shift from oars to rope. Sail handling is also shared work. The square of woven wool is large and heavy, especially if it is gathered damp from mist or spray. Raising it, lowering it, or adjusting the way it meets the wind requires several people to act together. The ropes of the rigging, the lines that support and control the mast and sail, must run freely. They must not catch beneath a chest lid, around a foot, or under a loose bundle. One person checks a line, another clears the working space. Someone else watches the sail, ready for the moment when the returning wind begins to hold it. The mast appears still, yet it carries considerable force. When wind fills the sail, that force travels through the mast and rigging into the hull. The ship's curved timbers and overlapping planks accept the pressure while continuing to move with the sea. A well-made vessel does not resist every motion. It yields a little. Timber creaks softly. The hull rises, settles, and finds its balance again. The sail is adjusted. At first it stirs without purpose, folding and opening as the breeze passes across it. Then the woven cloth rounds outward, its lower edge steadies, the ropes grow taut, and the mast gives a familiar low sound. The ship begins to draw forward beneath the sail. The rowers complete one final stroke. The blades enter, water gathers, the blades rise, droplets fall. Then the oars are lifted clear and brought aboard. Each shaft must be handled carefully so that it does not strike a neighbor or catch against the rigging. The blades pass over the gunwale, dripping seawater onto the planks. One crew member wipes a wet grip with a piece of cloth. Another checks the edge of a blade for a split. Finding none, the oars are settled securely along the side, ready for the next calm passage or careful turn. The change in sound is gradual. The measured splash of rowing fades. In its place comes the lower rustle of the sail and the soft conversation of water along the hull. The bow parts the sea with a steady murmur. Behind it, a narrow wake opens, widens, and slowly smooths away. With the wind doing the greater work, attention can be divided among other needs. Someone remains near the steering oar, watching the angle of the vessel. Another keeps an eye on the sail and its lines. A lookout studies the coast ahead, noting the pale stone and the dark opening between two islands. Elsewhere aboard, hands return to smaller tasks. A loose binding around a tool handle is tightened. A damp cloak is spread where the moving air can reach it. A coil of rope is examined and laid down more neatly. One crewmember rubs a tender place upon the palm where the oar has pressed against the skin, then draws a woolen sleeve over the hand. There may have been recognized responsibilities among such travelers, particularly for those with knowledge of steering, sail handling, or the route. Yet it would be unwise to imagine every crew arranged like a modern navy, with precise ranks and formal chains of command. Shipboard order could grow from experience, kinship, agreement, and practical trust. One person knew the coast. Another understood the sail. Another could repair a rope splice or recognize when a wooden fitting had begun to loosen. Their cooperation is visible in ordinary gestures. A rope is passed before it is requested. A chest is shifted to clear a path. Someone glances toward the stern before standing, making certain that the steering place remains open. The ship's limited space encourages awareness. Every movement belongs partly to the person making it and partly to everyone nearby. Perhaps some crews sang while they worked. A familiar song may have eased a repeated task, as songs have accompanied shared labor in many places and times. But it should not be assumed that every crew sang while rowing. This crew has crossed the quiet water mostly to the sounds already present: breathing, wood, water, and now and then a brief spoken word. As the wind steadies, even those few words become less frequent. The sail holds the breeze from behind one shoulder, firm enough to carry the loaded vessel onward. Sunlight moves across the planks as the ship changes its course. The damp marks left by the oars grow smaller and slowly disappear. Beyond the point, the sea opens in long, gentle bands. The crew rests within the work of the sail. They remain attentive, but they no longer need to pull with every stroke. The mast bears the pressure, the rigging hums faintly, the hull rises, settles, and continues onward. Hands that held the oars are free again. One person reaches beneath a folded cloth and brings out a wrapped loaf. The covering is opened with care. Nearby, someone finds a small wooden bowl and places it upon a chest. Above them, the sail draws steadily. Alongside them, the northern water passes in a quiet, unbroken flow, and the ordinary need for food becomes part of the day's gentle rhythm. Chapter 6. Meals Beneath the Open Sky. The wrapped loaf rests upon the lid of a sea chest. Its dark surface is crossed by shallow cracks. It is firm enough to travel well, yet not so dry that it cannot be cut. One member of the crew steadies it with a broad hand, while another draws a small knife from its sheath. The blade passes through the bread with a quiet scrape. One piece is cut, and then another. Each portion is modest and plain. The bread may be made from barley or rye, or perhaps from a mixture of grains. Oats, too, could be ground and added where they were available. Archaeological finds from the Viking Age show that people made many kinds of bread. Some were leavened and allowed to rise. Others were flat and unleavened. Their texture depended on the grain, the fineness of the flour, and the way they were baked. There was no single recipe shared by every household or carried aboard every ship. Grain varied from one region to another, and customs varied with it. A loaf prepared on a farm might be darker or coarser than one baked in a trading settlement. For this voyage, what matters most is that the bread keeps well, takes up little space, and can be divided without further preparation. The first pieces pass from hand to hand. No one needs to announce whose turn has come. Familiar gestures are enough. One person accepts a portion with a nod. Another waits until the knife has finished its slow work. Crumbs gather in a shallow line upon the chest lid, and a careful calm brushes them into a wooden bowl rather than allowing them to scatter between the floorboards. From another bundle comes dried fish, pale beneath its wrapping. Fish was an important food in many northern communities, especially where coastlines, islands, rivers, and lakes placed it close at hand. Drying removed much of its moisture and allowed it to last longer. Salted fish could also be carried, although salt was valuable and its use varied. Either form was better suited to a journey than fresh fish, which spoiled quickly. A strip is broken away and shared. It is tough at first, yielding gradually as it is chewed. Its dryness makes the next mouthful of water especially welcome. The drinking vessel is wooden, its rim smoothed by long use. Drinking horns existed in the Viking Age, but ordinary cups and bowls were often made from wood. Such vessels were practical for a working journey. There is no need for ceremony here, beneath the open sky. Water is poured carefully, for it is among the most important supplies aboard. The container has been stowed where it will not roll freely, with its weight considered alongside every other burden. The crew drinks enough, though no one pours carelessly. Fresh water could become stale during a voyage. A container may leak, and its contents may be spoiled by dirt or contamination. For travelers following a coast, regular landings provide opportunities to refill the supply from a dependable spring or stream. Someone raises the cup and takes a measured drink. Then the cup passes onward. Above it, the square sail holds its gentle curve. The mast gives a low creak as the ship settles into a longer swell. Ale may also have been carried on voyages. It was a familiar drink in Scandinavian society, and was made in different strengths and qualities. Yet ale did not remove the need for water. It would be misleading to imagine that everyone drank ale, because water was always unsafe. Clean water was both known and necessary. A crew had to judge its supply, protect it, and replenish it whenever the coast allowed. Today, the wooden cup carries water. Its taste holds a faint trace of the container, but it is cool enough, and the crew accepts it without comment. Beside the bread and fish, a small piece of cheese is unwrapped. Dairy foods were familiar in many Norse households where cattle, sheep, or goats were kept. Cheese could last longer than fresh milk, especially when it was firm and properly stored. Butter might also be carried, sometimes preserved with salt. A little butter spread upon coarse bread adds richness and useful nourishment. Even so, its wrapping must be closed again with care, protecting it from warmth, spray, and dirt. Preserved meat is another possible provision. It might be dried, smoked, or salted, depending upon the resources and customs of the household that prepared it. Yet the crew does not open every bundle at once. The supplies must last. Variety among the stores does not mean abundance at every meal. The voyage is a sequence of small needs, met patiently and with care. Nuts can fill the corners of a chest or bag, and they require no cooking. Dried peas or other legumes keep well too, though they become more useful when there is time to soak and heat them. Grain and flour may be carried for meals prepared later, once the ship reaches the shore. Gathered foods might also be added according to the season and place. Berries, edible greens, or other familiar plants could be collected during a landing. Such additions depended upon local knowledge, and they cannot be assumed for every route or every month. There was no single standardized Viking sailor's diet. The word Viking describes an activity and an era rather than one uniform way of life. Those traveling by ship might be traders, settlers, craftspeople, messengers, farmers visiting distant kin, or crews carrying goods between communities. Their food would reflect where they came from and what season they traveled in. It would depend upon their resources, the length of the voyage, and how often they expected to land. One ship's provisions might differ greatly from those of another, even when both vessels moved through the same northern waters. Nor have exact meal schedules survived for an ordinary voyage such as this one. No record tells us when every loaf was opened or how many pieces of fish were shared on a particular day. The evidence offers a plausible picture rather than a fixed rule. Durable food, simple vessels, careful storage, meals shaped by work, wind, weather, and opportunity. The ship continues onward while the crew eats. There is no table beyond the flat lid of a chest, no private place, and little room for unnecessary movement. Knees brace lightly against planks or neighboring chests. One person keeps an eye upon the sail, another looks toward the crew member attending the steering oar. Eating does not interrupt the voyage, it settles quietly within it. A spoon lies in the wooden bowl, although there is little need for it now. Spoons and ladles were ordinary tools, suited to porridge, broth, or stew. Wooden bowls could hold grain, dairy foods, or whatever warm dish had been prepared. Knives served many daily purposes, from dividing food to other practical shipboard work. After the meal, the blade will be wiped before it returns to its sheath. Porridge would be a practical way to turn grain into a filling meal whenever cooking was possible. Barley, oats, or another grain could be simmered in water, perhaps with a little butter or some other food at hand. But a warm pot is more likely to wait for a landing. An open flame inside a wooden vessel carries clear risks. The planks are timber, the sail and ropes are made from fibers, many belongings are wool, cloth, leather, or wood. The materials used to seal and protect the hull must also be treated with caution. A brazier, or another carefully controlled source of heat, may have been used in some situations. Even so, ordinary cooking practices aboard Viking-age ships are not documented well enough to describe one certain arrangement. Conditions would have mattered. So would the vessel, the weather, and the experience of the crew. When regular landings were possible, people likely preferred to cook ashore. On firm ground, a small fire could be placed safely between stones. A pot could rest without sliding, as the hull rose and settled beneath it. Water could be fetched. Damp wool clothing could be spread out. Food could be prepared without asking everyone aboard to shift around the cook. For now, the meal remains cool and simple. Bread, dried fish, a little cheese, and water are enough for the middle of the day. Later, if the ship finds a sheltered landing, there may be porridge warmed over a low fire. Perhaps peas will soften in a pot. Perhaps a little preserved meat will flavor the water. That later meal will require time, a safe place, and steady ground. This one requires only a knife, a bowl, and patient hands. Conversation remains low and sparse. A few words pass concerning the bread and the remaining water. Someone points toward a bird moving over the sea, then lowers the hand again. Another person turns a strip of fish between thumb and forefinger before dividing it with a companion. Most understanding rests in routine. People who have worked together do not need to explain every movement. The sun warms the upper edge of the hull. In the shadow beneath the sail, the air remains cool. Wool sleeves brush against rough wood. The scent of tar, salt water, bread, and dried fish gathers lightly in the narrow space. Then it thins whenever the wind crosses the ship. Far away, the familiar coast runs in muted colors. A dark shoulder of rock reaches into the sea. Behind it, lowland rises. Softened by distance, the vessel does not hurry toward it, and the land does not seem to retreat. Ship and coast keep one another company across the water. The crew eats without haste. Each person knows that the work of the day will continue. Ropes may need attention. The sail may require adjustment. The ship's course may change with the coast or the wind. Yet for these few moments, the steady movement of the hull asks little from them. Wood creaks softly. Water moves along the overlapping planks. The sail gives a low rustle and grows quiet again. When everyone has eaten, the remaining bread is gathered. The cut face of the loaf is covered, and the cloth is folded tightly around it. The fish returns to its wrapping. Cheese and butter are protected from sun and spray. The knife is wiped and sheathed. The crumbs in the bowl are eaten, and the bowl is placed where it cannot slide beneath a foot. The cup makes one final passage. Only a little water is poured. Then the container is closed, and its fastening is checked. These small acts of order preserve food as surely as drying, salting, or baking. A loose wrapping invites damp. An open vessel wastes water. A poorly placed bowl may roll into the working space just when a rope must be handled. On a ship, tidiness is not decoration. It is part of seamanship. Soon the meal leaves almost no trace. Hands return to ropes, steering, and the quiet work of supporting the vessel's movement. The sail still draws the breeze from behind one shoulder. The hull rises and settles. Water folds away from the overlapping planks. The pause has been brief, but it has restored a little warmth and strength. And water have done what they were meant to do. Nothing more is required of them. With the food wrapped away and the cups steadied in their places, attention returns to the horizon. The coast ahead is more than scenery. Every headland, island, channel, and change of color offers information. The shape of the land is a map remembered in the mind, and the sea beside it is a path that must be read. Chapter 7. Reading Sea, Sun, and Shore. The headland ahead has been visible since the meal was put away. At first, it seemed no more than a low blue shape resting upon the water. Now, as the ship draws nearer, its outline separates into slopes and ledges. A rounded hill rises behind a darker point of stone. Below it, a narrow, pale line marks a beach. What appeared to be one piece of land slowly reveals a channel between the headland and a smaller island beyond. Several people aboard have seen this coast before. They do not need a drawn chart to recognize it. They remember how the hill appears from the south. They know how the point of stone hides the beach until the vessel reaches a certain angle. They recall that the channel looks narrow from a distance, but opens gradually as the ship approaches. This is how much Viking Age navigation was practiced. It depended upon experience, patient attention, and knowledge carried from one journey to the next. A sailor who has traveled here many times may remember a sequence of landmarks. First comes the long headland with its rounded back. Beyond it lies the low island where birds gather. Then there is a river mouth, difficult to see until the water changes color. Farther north, two steep hills appear to meet, though a fjord opens between them. Such directions live in spoken words and careful memory. An older traveler teaches them to someone younger. The younger sailor listens, then watches the coast until the description becomes a familiar shape. On a later voyage, that sailor may pass the same knowledge to another. There is no mystery in it. The knowledge is practical. It is gathered slowly on ordinary days, through repeated journeys and changing light and weather. Along northern shores, the land offers many signs. There are islands, beaches, river mouths, steep-sided fjords, and sheltered landing places. There are also skerries. A skerry is a small rocky island or reef, common along northern coasts. Some rise clearly above the sea. Others show only a low back of stone. A few carry a fringe of dark weed, while others are barren gray, polished by waves and weather. At high water, the smallest may nearly disappear. The person steering keeps these rocks in mind. A skerry can be a useful landmark, but it may also show where a shallow shelf extends beneath the surface. The crew does not rely upon the visible stone alone. They watch the water around it. A faint line of broken ripples may reveal another rock nearby. A smooth patch beside rougher water may mark a change in current. Where the sea grows shallower, its color may soften from deep blue-gray to green. It may become lighter still above sand or pale stone. Yet color alone cannot give a certain answer. Cloud changes the light, and wind changes the surface. A reflection can make deep water seem pale, while shadow can darken a shallow place. Color becomes useful when it is considered beside remembered landforms, the direction of the swell, and the known shape of the coast. The ship continues beside the headland rather than turning directly into the broad sea. Coastal travel is often easier and safer to navigate. Landmarks remain available, and sheltered water can often be found when needed. A crew may stop at a known beach, inlet, or settlement. Fresh water may be obtained there. Food may be prepared, clothing dried, and small repairs made before the voyage continues. Scandinavian sailors of the Viking Age also made major crossings over open ocean. Such journeys required deep knowledge, endurance, and close attention to the world around the ship. This voyage, however, follows a quieter coastal route. The land is seldom far away. It comes and goes behind points and islands, but it remains a steady companion. Above the sail, the sun appears as a pale brightness behind thin cloud. Its exact edge cannot be seen, yet its place in the sky is clear enough. The crew knows whether it stands in the eastern morning, the southern part of its daily path, or the long western light of evening. Its direction and height help them understand both time and course. The sailors know the seasonal changes as well. They have watched where the sun rises over familiar ridges, and where it settles beyond particular islands. This knowledge does not need to be written as numbers. It is part of the year itself, learned through work, travel, and many hours spent beneath the open sky. At night, when the air is clear, stars can also offer guidance. Their familiar patterns move across the darkness in a regular way. A sailor who knows them may keep a direction even when the coast has become no more than a shadow. But stars are not always visible, just as the sun is not always clear. Northern skies often carry mist, rain, or broad sheets of cloud. Navigation cannot depend upon one sign alone. The crew reads several signs together, allowing each to support or correct the others. The wind brings another kind of information. It presses steadily into the woolen sail and cools the faces turned toward the bow. The crew remembers which winds are common in the season and how they tend to behave along this part of the coast. Hills can bend the moving air around them. A fjord may guide wind through its narrow opening. A breeze that seems gentle behind an island may strengthen when the vessel passes beyond its shelter. The sailors feel these changes on their cheeks, in their clothing, and through the pull of the sail. Currents have patterns of their own. Water may flow along a shore, curl around a point, or move strongly through a channel between islands. The steering oar gives some sense of this movement. So does the angle of the vessel. If the bow points toward one landmark, while the ship is carried little by little toward another, the crew can see that the current is setting them sideways. The sail may be adjusted, or the course altered to allow for the drift. No movement is hurried. The correction is made early and calmly, before a small change becomes a large one. The waves are read with the same patience. A long swell arriving from the open sea may continue even when the local wind is light. Shorter ripples form above it. Near shallows, waves may become steeper or gather closer together. Around a headland, two patterns of water may meet and cross. The character of the waves may offer clues about distant landforms, shallows, currents, or changing weather. Still, none of these signs is infallible. A change in the water may come from wind, current, submerged stone, or weather still far away. So the crew considers several clues at once. They look toward the land and then toward the sky. They watch the movement of weed on the surface. They feel the way the hull rises beneath them. They notice the pressure on the steering oar and the steady breath filling the sail. A strand of floating vegetation passes beside the ship, dark and glossy with water. Near a rocky coast, torn weed may drift outward with the tide. Farther from shore, it can offer a clue to the direction in which the surface water has traveled. Once again, it is only a clue. The sea can carry light things a long way. A bird calls somewhere beyond the sail. A second bird answers. Soon both appear, white against the gray-blue distance. Their flight bends toward the low island ahead. Bird calls and bird behavior can sometimes be useful, especially near coasts or islands. Calls may be heard before the land is clearly seen. Birds returning in groups may suggest a nesting place. Their direction may agree with the other signs already noticed by the crew. But seabirds can travel far from shore. A single winged shape cannot serve as a certain guide. The sailors watch the birds, but they also keep the island, the sun, the wind, and the water in mind. Literary traditions sometimes describe ravens being released to seek land. Such stories are memorable, but they should not be treated as proof of a normal Viking Age navigation system. The daily work of finding a route was more likely based upon accumulated observation. Sun and stars, wind and waves, birds and currents, and remembered coastlines were considered together. Other objects are sometimes connected with Viking navigation. There is no firm evidence that Viking Age sailors used the magnetic compass. A fragment found in Greenland has been interpreted by some as part of a so-called sun compass, but its exact use remains debated. Crystals, sometimes called sunstones, may, under certain conditions, help indicate the sun's position behind cloud. They appear in later texts and have also been considered in experimental studies. Yet evidence for their routine use aboard Viking Age ships remains inconclusive. It can be tempting to imagine one clever instrument solving the whole problem. The reality was likely quieter and more demanding. Good navigation rested in practiced eyes, careful memory, and knowledge shared among people. Even spoken sailing directions must be considered thoughtfully. Most written examples survive from later periods. They cannot automatically be treated as unchanged Viking Age practice. Still, experienced travelers could pass remembered directions from one journey to another. One person might explain how long to hold a course. Another might describe which headland to keep on the left, where a current pulls strongly, or which inlet offers shelter in a certain wind. The instructions become clearer when the place itself appears. Spoken memory and visible land meet upon the water. Near the low island, the sea grows greener. The steering oar turns gently, guiding the vessel away from a line of half-covered rocks. One member of the crew moves forward and watches over the side. Everyone nearby leaves room for that work. In very shallow water, a long pole may be lowered carefully to test the depth. Sounding lines, which are ropes used to measure the water beneath a vessel, are broadly plausible in historical seafaring. However, direct evidence for their routine use on Viking Age Scandinavian ships is limited. Here, close to shore, a simple pole offers a cautious and practical test. The pole touches below, rises dripping, and is lowered once more. The ship turns slightly. Soon the water deepens and its color darkens again. Behind the vessel, the headland has changed shape. The rounded hill now appears sharper, and the pale beach has vanished behind stone. This changing outline confirms the ship's progress. A landmark is not one fixed picture. It must be recognized from different directions. It may be seen in morning haze, in evening light, or beneath weather that hides part of the land. A familiar island can look broad from one side and narrow from another. Two hills may seem joined, then slowly divide as the ship moves. This is why experience matters. Memory holds not only the name of a place, but also its many appearances. Ahead, the island becomes familiar. Its western end lies low, while its eastern ridge rises like the back of a resting animal. Dark birds circle above the cliffs. Beyond it lies sheltered water and another remembered stretch of coast. For a while, the crew attends to these reassuring signs. The sail remains full. The steering oar rests firmly against the current. Timber creaks. Water folds away from the overlapping planks, and the island slowly takes its proper place beside the bow. Sea, sun, and shore are not read separately. They form one changing picture. No single mark gives a perfect answer. Instead, many small observations gather together. A headland alters its shape. A bird turns toward an island. The pale sun holds its place behind cloud. The water becomes greener above a shallower shore. Each sign is modest. Together, they are enough. Then farther out, another sign appears. Beneath the clouds, the gray has begun to deepen. It forms a soft, distant band, moving slowly across the water. The familiar island still lies ahead, clear and steady, but now the sky and sea are offering new information. Without alarm, the crew turns its attention toward the weather. Chapter 8. A Day of Weather. The gray band beneath the clouds remains distant at first. Not a wall, but a place where sea and air seem to draw together. Rain is falling there, softening the horizon and turning the far water the color of worn iron.